Hi everyone, Kim here in Northern California at Olive City Permaculture. Now today we're not talking about gardening, but we are talking about something that's important to all gardeners and important to homeowners in general, and that is building a wonderful new wooden fence. Now, fences are important to all of us for many differing reasons. Privacy, protection, maybe aesthetics, the general look and feel of it all, as well as the increased property value a new fence brings. Now, if you build the fence yourself, you'll be saving tons of money and you'll be in control of the exact material that is used and the quality of the work that is done. Now, in today's video, we're going to be talking specifically about building a cedar fence, which is exactly what we did about 3 weeks ago. If you've watched some of my videos in the past, you'll know that I've been talking about replacing my backyard fence for quite some time. We planned to do it this spring, and when the rain finally stopped, we got on it. And now here is a glimpse of what the fence looked like, just how desperately we needed to replace it. Well, that was before, and as you can see behind me, the fence looks a whole lot different and a whole lot better now. Let me give you a broader look.
Doesn't this look amazing? Be sure to watch all the way to the end because I'm going to be sharing ways you can add extra privacy and longevity to your fence. It might seem intimidating, but if you've done any kind of DIY before, I really believe you can handle this project too. Even if you're new to tools, if you're willing to practice a bit, I think you can do it too. I am so pleased with how our fence looks now, and I'm really excited to share with you how you can do the same thing on your own property. Even if you have a slope on your property that goes up and down like ours does here, you can still end up with a great result.
Now, my son Jim, a few years back, worked for a licensed professional fencer for about a year. So he came to this fencing project of ours with quite a bit of confidence and experience. However, I'm going to put in a disclaimer here. We are not professionals, and anything we say in this video is strictly advice. It's advice given based on our experience with this specific building project and on the experience Jim had in the past with various fencing jobs. Now, we know that this is definitely one way to build a sturdy, long-lasting, beautiful cedar fence. However, it is not the only way, and nor are we saying it is the best way. It is just the way that worked super well for us, and we're very happy with the results. Now, as with all do-it-yourself projects that involve powerful and sometimes dangerous tools, please follow all manufacturer instructions and safety precautions. It is absolutely not necessary to be a professional fencer to build your own fence, but it is necessary to understand and respect all your tools when working on any do-it-yourself project, including building your own fence. In this video, I'm going to share with you all of the supplies, tools, and skills you need to build your own cedar fence, including the all-important choice of what nails to use with your cedar wood. Now, these are the types of nails that you want to be using for your cedar fence. Not necessarily this brand, although I highly recommend it, but you want stainless steel number 304, hot dipped galvanized or polymer coated nails. I'm using ring shank nails because they work the best for securing your wood boards, your pickets, into the rails, far better than deck screws, which some people use on fences and are known to actually cause instability over the years. Now, you'll see these are paper tape. They also have plastic tape. That's the type that is recommended for the nail gun that we used. But they all pretty much work the same. What you do not want to get is the type of nail that has zinc in it. And that can be confusing because they might be labeled polymer coated or galvanized. You definitely want to make sure you're getting the right nail, because if you get a nail that has zinc in it, the zinc will react with acids in your cedar and cause corrosion and rust. And what does that lead to very quickly? Black streaks coming down from the nails. So ugly. This is from a small section of my fence in a corner that a friend did with the wrong kind of nail. We'll definitely be replacing this whole section very soon.
Here are the supplies you will need. And here are the tools you will need. Finally, here are the skills you must have or learn.
Now, yesterday I talked with Jim about all the steps involved in this fence building project. And if you're planning to build a cedar fence yourself or with someone or hire someone to do it, I highly recommend you listen to what he has to say, because he shares a lot of very important tips about how to build a great fence and about how to avoid some common problems that might trip you up if you aren't aware of them. So I know there's lots of tips you could share with us about different aspects of the job, but before you get started on the job, what are some of the things you might need to think about or definitely should think about?
The first thing I would think about would be what type of weather you're in, whether it's too dry and hot or whether it's too cold and raining. You don't want to build your fence in the rain because it'll mess up how you're digging your holes. And if you're working in too much of heat, then you may get heat stroke, or yeah, you might just be unable to do the work correctly.
And does the weather somehow or the season affect the ground at all?
In the summer or towards the end of summer, once the ground is dried up, if you're in a place that doesn't get a lot of rain, then it's going to be a lot harder to dig the post holes.
Yeah, if you live where we live especially, there's almost no time of year where the ground is not super hard, but hopefully some people have nicer ground than us. What about other general tips?
Other general tips I would say would be, when you're getting your supplies, make sure that you do all of your measurements for your supplies a couple times. Even if you think you've got them right the first time, do them again, and do them 3 times just to be safe, and get the right amount of supplies and have some extra as well, because you're always going to have a couple boards, a couple, maybe you'll be using a little too many nails. You want to have extra of probably everything, at least a couple extra.
Yeah. So you're not running back to the store, yes, or if there was something you order online, like we did the nails, you would really be up a creek if you ran out of those.
So you're going to have to wait for
a
couple weeks or a couple days.
Yeah, okay. All right, what about when you're getting ready to put the posts in the ground? That's a bit intimidating to some people. What would we need to be thinking about, especially there?
Some things you want to think about are, you're obviously going to start from one end of the line and start moving down towards the other end. When you're putting in posts, you want to put them in one at a time. So you want to dig the entire hole, put the post in, get the concrete in there, and then you can go ahead and move on to the next one. So when you're going to cement, you want to have your post in already and have it level and up against the string that you've hung already, and then you can start putting the cement in. If you've added too little water, your cement won't mix and it'll be crumbly, it'll break apart. And if you add too much water, then it'll be not strong enough at all. It'll need more of it to fill up the hole. Once you're putting in the cement into the hole, I make sure that it's level already and the post is level and it's up against the string so that it's in line with all the other posts, and then I go ahead and pour in the cement. Especially if you're working alone, you want to make sure to level the post beforehand, before you pour in the cement, so that way it's already in the right position, because once you pour it in, you want to and you can adjust it again once you're done to make sure it's perfect, but it's easier to do if you've already had it set up in the correct position.
So we don't have to worry about the cement drying so fast that you can't make a minor adjustment after you get most of the cement in.
And once you're done with the cement, you're going to let it set for a while. Depending on how, it can change depending on how much water you added. If you added a ton of water, it's going to take a lot longer to set. And
that's important, right? Because you can't put the rails on until the cement's completely dry.
You can't put on the rails until the cement has dried.
Yeah.
Usually at least a couple hours will be fine. But to be able to cut off the tops of the posts and then put the rails on, it has to be set.
Which is another important reason why you better make sure it's not about to rain when you start this project.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Once you've got the posts set and they've had their time the concrete to set, you go through and you can cut the tops of the posts off. Depending on how deep your holes were, they might be a little bit different from post to post, but we went ahead and cut them at 5 feet because you can go a couple inches taller than that if you want, but it worked well for what we wanted to do with our 6 feet fence. So yeah, we cut them off at 5 feet from the ground, from where your concrete, the top of your concrete, basically.
Okay.
And then once we did that, you go ahead and you can put on the rails. So if you got 8-foot rails, then you should be able to go from the center of the post to the center of the next post. And you shouldn't need to cut too much. You occasionally may need to cut like an inch or two off of one, or you may not need to on one. It just depends. On the bottom rails, you will need to cut because you're fitting them in between the posts. They're not going to be on top.
Okay.
But with the bottom ones as well, you also, instead of laying them horizontal on top, you're having them vertical up against the side that you're going to be putting the boards on, which gives your fence line more support. And you want them about 6 feet off, not 6 feet. You want them about 6 inches off the ground. And the way we did that, we cut the tops of the posts off and went ahead and laid them down on the ground, and they were right about 6 inches, a little bit taller.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And so we were able to just lay the rail on top of that, and then cut it where it would fit inside of the 2 posts. Makes it a lot more secure, makes it so you don't have to do as many cuts, because if you're trying to eyeball it, then you're gonna either cut too much off, or you're just gonna be too short, and you're gonna be going super gradual increments.
Okay. So we got a nail gun for this job, and you're familiar with them because of your job working with a fencer for a little while back. Yeah. But we got a 30-degree nail framer, and it worked really well, didn't it?
Yeah, it worked really well.
Yeah, we had done, you had replaced a small corner section of our fence before when I had expanded the duck pen, and we didn't have a nail gun at that time. And how did you have to do that? Hammer, the old-fashioned way. And you did a good job, but it sure took a while, huh?
Yeah, it takes a lot longer.
Yeah, it's so much quicker and more efficient to use the nail gun. So do you have any tip about the nail gun that might help someone else that's new to it?
I would definitely suggest practicing with your nail gun, especially if you haven't used it before, if it's brand new, because they're all a little bit different. They all have their own little finicky things you have to work out. So I would practice on some scrap wood if you never used them before, or if it's a new one. One of the problems the only problem really that I had with our nail gun was that it was a little bit too powerful. So I would go ahead and ease off when I was shooting it to make sure that it wouldn't punch through the fence board, and it would actually just go perfectly in line with the fence.
So it wouldn't embed too deeply.
Right.
Yeah, it makes it more level with the boards. Yeah, and you did a great job with that. The bottom rails and nailing them, is there anything that would be helpful there?
So with the bottom rails, you may want shorter nails for the bottom rail, especially if you've made the bottom rail like we did vertical, because when they're vertical, there's less space for the nail to go in, and it might poke out the back. Another thing, when you're nailing in the boards, I would suggest after the first couple boards you put in, going and walking around to the back of the fence and checking, and just making sure that you're actually shooting in line, because you might have your rail a little bit, the nails poking out a little bit through the top instead of being correctly into the rail. So just checking and making sure that you're doing
checking your work. Yeah, that's a really good point.
When you're buying boards, you're not going to be able to get all perfect boards, depending on the place you buy them from, but usually you're going to have some boards that are a little bit warped, a little bit bent at points.
Yes, and that is a reason why I think you should never order your boards or any of your supplies ahead of time and have them, pack it up. That might sound like a good idea. They do all the work of picking them out and carrying them around and all that, but they're not going to pick out the good boards. They're just going to stack up whatever they've got, whereas we spent a lot of time picking out our boards and trying to get the best ones they had, and there was a lot we threw back, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and occasionally you get them home, and we stored ours for over a month, I think, because of the weather, and occasionally a board that looked good in the store ends up not being good when you get it out on the job site. So that's another reason to get extra. Yep. So you can be prepared. Yeah.
And the way you can kind of work around it is by taking the level that you've used on your posts, and with every fence board, just checking your fence board, making sure it's level.
You mean on the sides, right?
On the sides of the board. The top is going to be lined up with the string, which when you're using the string, it's a little bit different than the post, where you string it from one end of the post line to the other. With the string for the fence boards, you want to start with one post, and at most you're going to want to go to the next post or the one after that. So 1 or 2 posts at most at a time to deal with any sort of bad leveling with your ground. Like if you're going down a slope if you do it from one end to the other, your fence line is going to be constantly going up and down, and your fence is going to look terrible.
Look terrible,
so
yeah.
You want to do it by 1 or 2 sections at most. We did 2. There was, I think, 1 section where we did 1 just to make sure, because it was a really big slope. Yeah, it goes back and forth, back and forth. Some slopes are just a long way down, in which case you could probably do 2 and be fine. But if you're going up and down again, then yeah, you want to do 1 at a time. And so when you hang your string for that, you're going to put up a reference board. You're going to screw it in right in the middle of the board on a post, and then you'll just hang your string from a nail that you put in on one side of the board.
Yeah, I'll show them a little demonstration of that so they can see it.
So you'll put in a nail right on this angled area, tie a string to it, and then the string drapes right across the center of the top of your fence boards and continues down the line to the next fence post. This is the way you keep your fence board tops all at the same height. Okay, so you're using the level on the sides of the board.
It's to combat any bad boards you have in the lot, and making sure to level every single board will make your fence look a lot better.
Seems like a lot of work at the time, but it's well worth it in the end.
When you get to the very last board, then it'll make it a lot better when you're needing to cut that last board at the very end because you have less space. Unless it lines up perfectly and you just happen to be the right distance where it adds the board on perfectly, you'll have to cut a little bit off with like a circular saw. And if you're level, that'll make that a lot easier.
A lot easier, yeah. What about the bottom with the, like you said, the slope going up and down, or even people that don't have a slope? It's unlikely that their soil is going to be perfectly level from one end of their fence line to the other.
Right, you'll have to make some soil adjustments because you may have a little bit of a gap under some parts of the fence if there was a giant up and down in the middle of your, between 2 posts. So in some places you'll need to add some soil. In some places when you're adding boards, you have that string on the top and you want to keep your fence boards underneath it, and it'll be over the top, in which case I just take a hammer and claw away at the ground right below where you're putting the fence board in, and then it'll fit in perfectly.
Yeah, that worked really well. So post hole diggers don't work when their digging edges look like this. So Jim, why did the clamshell diggers look like that? That's not how they're supposed to look. They don't work that well if they look like that, do they?
No, they do not work well at all. Obviously, in some places, your dirt is going to be really tough, where no matter when you dig, like in this area.
Yeah.
And in that case, I would say just get a jackhammer. It makes it so much easier. It cuts on down on the time by several hours. As long as you're strong enough to use it, then that's the way to go in my book. Granted, I've worked on a lot of fences before, so I've used it a lot. The first time I used it, it took a little bit getting used to, but it makes it so much faster. You're gonna get better holes. Now, in some places, I've worked places where you have normal soil. Clamshell diggers will be fine, and they'll work just great. But if you got rock hard soil like us, then yeah, you want to go ahead and use the jackhammer.
Now, isn't there some other manual tool you could try?
Yes, so if you don't have a jackhammer, or if you're just having a little bit of a problem with like a root, then using an iron bar is really good. It's just a 6-foot bar that you can buy at the store, and it's made out of steel. It's got a point on one end, and you just slam that into the ground and it'll loosen up the dirt for you. That one's pretty effective, especially if you're using clamshell diggers, because if you hit any point of trouble, then you can use that. If you're not using a jackhammer, then I would want that along with the clamshell diggers.
And if you are using a jackhammer, definitely use ear protection, right?
Use ear protection, use eye protection if you're using the nail gun.
Yes, I mentioned that at the beginning, and I'm restating it now. You got to use a lot of protection. Closed-toed shoes, sunscreen, ear protection, eye protection. What else?
Don't do it in shorts.
Oh, don't do it in shorts. Some of these things, maybe we didn't do as well as we should have, but everyone else do it the right way, right? Right. So Jim, any last words you want to give us of advice?
The main things would be to take your time, especially if this is the first time doing it. Don't try and knock it all out in one day. Do it in chunks. And you can always look up things. You can always look up videos or look up articles about how to do a certain part you may not be sure on. Always make sure to double check your work. That's one of the biggest things.
As you go, right? Yeah. And would you say to someone who's
you know, somewhat handy with tools, but they're not a professional by any means. You know, they're not a natural do-it-yourselfer. Is this a job that if you do take it in chunks, like you said, that you can tackle yourself with maybe just one helper?
I think so. I think as long as you're learning all the tools, reading the manuals, maybe watching a video too, and if you feel comfortable using the tools, then I think you can do it.
And saves you lots of money.
Saves you lots.
And you can get it to turn out the way you want.
Yeah, so you also know everything that's going into your fence, and you know anything that you need to fix.
Right. Thank you very much, Jim, for my beautiful new fence. Now, these last steps are a great example of how you, when you build your own fence, have control over the function and the appearance of your fence in the end. They also highlight the fact that you have the ability, the power, to improve the strength and longevity of your fence when you build it yourself. Now, many of you have asked me in the past, what are these thin boards that are between my fence boards? So these are called Batten Boards, and I really like the effect they have of giving me more privacy. As your cedar boards age, they will inevitably shrink just a bit, creating a gap between the boards. This covers up that gap, giving you full coverage that I really like the look of. Now, these are relatively inexpensive and are available at the big box stores like Home Depot, where we got all of our supplies. The one thing you need to be aware of is that they do sometimes warp. This is why we attach the batten boards with deck screws. That way, if one of them warps, we can easily unscrew them and put in another one. Now, you might be wondering how this board ends up looking this beautiful color. Well, I'll show you. It's this Preserva wood penetrating oil stain and sealer. Cedar transparent toner. This stain and sealer preserves your wood. It protects it from the weather, from the sun beating down on it, from water damage, from the freezes, from everything. You need to do this as soon as you get your fence up, or as soon as possible. You'll probably need several cans of it. You can get a very large can for slightly cheaper. This 1 gallon cost about $40. Well worth it. We used 4 gallons on the front and back of our fence and are very happy because we know this is going to preserve the wood. It's recommended you maintain this by reapplying it every year or two, depending on how much intense sun you get or how much rain you get. One cool thing is you can apply this to some of your older fence wood if you have another section that wasn't replaced, and it will bring it new life, often helping it blend right in with the new fence sections. Of course, it's always best to build your entire fence at one time, but sometimes that isn't possible. So this is a little trick that is very helpful. So, far less expensive, more personalized, higher quality, and the ability to maintain the fence through the years. Wow, those are a lot of strong points to consider when you're thinking about building your own cedar fence. In my opinion, it is well worth the time and effort involved. And I think if you take on this project, you'll be very glad you did. I know we are. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you got some good information from this video, and if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. And again, just remember, we're not professionals, but we are so happy with the end result of our new cedar fence, and I think you could be too. Have a great week, everyone.